There we go. Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us. We did a little workaround because the technical bugs decided to visit us this afternoon, even though it's not Friday the 13th, but it is Friday, which was kind of unfair. They're only supposed to do that on the 13th, right? Anyway, I'm joined today with one of my favorite authors, Jane Haseldine. And the good thing about being on Zoom is that now hopefully my holding up the book will have it read correctly instead of backwards, right? Because on
Yes.
Instagram, everything is backwards when you're live. So then you can see this beautiful cover that she has for her new book with blurbs and all kinds of good stuff on the back. And Jane's with me. But before we get into all the nitty gritty, let me tell you a little bit about Jane's background, and then we'll talk some more about that too. She has a really extensive background. She's been a journalist, a columnist, a newspaper report or editor, excuse me, a crime reporter, magazine writer, so lots of different media. And she's also been a deputy director of communications for a governor, which I just learned was in Delaware. So I bet that was fascinating because I, you know, disclaimer here, having worked for the government,
Got a little
working for
inside
the government is full of adventure. I know that part because I was there for 21 years with the state of California. So anyway, we're going to get busy and start talking about her life as a writer, how she came from all that background with actually writing about real things, crime, news reporting, news editing into fiction, and how she's made the journey now to her fifth book. Do I have that right?
five.
Okay, this is book number 5, and this is a standalone. It's a new book with new characters. Her first 4 books were about Julia Gooden, and those are wonderful books. And if you guys have not read them, I recommend that you go back and get them. I did go on Amazon and look, and they are all there in one form or another. And some of them are, I think, in Kindle, and some are not, if I'm correct.
Yeah, you should be able to find if you want to read the books, they are there. Take a look. You'll find them if you like audio or print or whatever, however you like to read, you'll find them.
Yeah. I found several formats. I found a couple of mass market paperbacks, some hardbacks. So whatever your preference might be, you can get your hands on them. Start with the first one, go through the series because the character does develop and she gets into all sorts of adventures and lots of danger. They're very,
Yes.
don't start them at like 11 o'clock at night if you have to get up in the morning because you won't go to sleep. And that's true of this one too, though, I have to warn you. So Jane, you
Yes.
started out with this background in writing about real people and real events.
Yes.
And how long did you do all of that?
I've been a journalist most of my professional career. I graduated from Syracuse University, go Orangemen, with a journalism degree. I wrote for the Daily Orange. Those were my first bylines, circa forever ago. And then I worked at newspapers and magazines across the country, and it was really fun. It was really fun. My mom was a writer. She was also a journalist, and a really big influence on my life about books and people's stories. And we moved a lot when I was a kid. And one thing I discovered, like going to a new school or being the new kid in town, one thing I would do to break the ice on the playground is I would ask someone a question about themselves. And I discovered 2 things. One, I think most everybody likes to talk about themselves in one way or the other. And I also think, or one thing I realized is that I really like people's stories, and that really drove me. And just being curious about people. One of the first papers I ever worked at was south of San Jose. It was a small paper, and this was at the first paper was around the time as if you see me leaning over, my light is going out here, so we might have light, we might not. Um, so the first paper I worked at, there were phone books back then. If you remember
Oh,
phone
yeah.
books, they were so huge. I mean, you could like put them in a crime novel. They could probably like be a weapon that could kill someone. They were so giant, right? And one we had this editor who would literally make all the reporters. You go on a rotating basis. You'd have to go through and like randomly pick someone and call them up, and you have to A, convince them that you're not crazy. You're not, B, you're not trying to sell them anything, and C, let them interview you for an article. And the whole point was everyone has a story. And I believe that. And that sort of the idea of talking to people, getting to know their stories, and then covering the crime beat, like uncovering uncovering the truth, helping people when you can, that really, really drove me. And I love doing it. It was a lot of fun. And I think working at papers, I think journalists are curious and they're smart and they're funny. So those are really, really fun times. And I actually met my husband at my first newspaper. He was the political reporter, and we actually were very competitive. And I had uncovered a story in the police department, and I should have been the lead reporter on it. And the editor at the time made me work with a political reporter who turned out to be my husband, and I was so mad. I'm like, "This is my story." But anyway, it all worked out. We got married. We've been married 25 years, and we have 2 kids. So newspapers and writing has been an adventure, both professionally and personally. It was very rewarding.
Excellent. So then how did you segue into novels, fiction?
Well, I always loved books. I mentioned my mom. When I was a kid, like books were all over our house. My middle name is Eyre, Jane Eyre. My
Mhm.
mom loved books. I actually thought my middle name was spelled AIR until I was like 8 years old, and then she explained to me. She's like, "You're actually named for a great literary character." But every Saturday, like kids would be going to watch cartoons or sleeping in, but my mother would schlep us to the library um, and she would also read. I have 2 older sisters and an older brother, and she would read to us every night. And it would be a chapter of a book. And, I look back, like some of the books were certainly more sophisticated than a 7-year-old would be reading, but it was Agatha Christie and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and it was so exciting.
Oh,
Sometimes
yeah.
I pretend to be asleep, but I was like, I was probably more interested than my older siblings were in the books. But I always loved books and always loved writing. When my second son was born, we were living it was a perfect setting to start writing a scary book. We were living in Michigan at the time. My husband's from Michigan. We had moved there for a project he was working on, and we had this lovely house. It was in the middle of nowhere. Like our nearest neighbors were miles away, and I was thinking, okay, I'm home with these 2 young kids. My husband's traveling all the time. I'm in a spooky house. And added to the mix, we were getting what's the phrase, ding dong ditched in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
It turned out they were kids, and it would ring our bell and run away. And at one time they left like a live fish in a plastic bag with with water in it, so it was alive. But I was like, "Oh my god, what's it mean? Like, you're gonna sleep with the fishes? What is this?" So it was like all this spooky stuff happening, and I was like, I've always wanted to write a mystery novel. I'm living in the spooky house, doorbells ringing in the middle of the night, and I had an idea. For before that, I'd only been a journalist, but I'd always loved books. I'm like, how do I marry these 2 together? And I thought, okay, if for a character, what would be this character's biggest fear? And so the character became Julia Gooden, and her biggest fear would be if something happened to her children. And then I thought, okay, well, how would she react if this biggest fear actually happened to her when she was young? Like, and that happens in the book. When she's a kid, her older brother is abducted, and she it's a cold case, and he was everything to her. She had a difficult childhood, and he protected her. Uh, and then as an adult, she becomes a journalist because she's trying to give people answers that she could never get for herself. And then in the first book, her young son is abducted, and she has basically 24 hours to figure out whether sudden reminders of her brother are clues leading to her son's abductor or merely coincidence. And it's funny with that book, I had called it Synchronicity. And I remember my editor wanted to change it to the last time she saw him. And I'm like, oh man, that's such a like a long book title. But it worked out. It worked out well.
Yeah.
But with that first book, I wrote it. I really like the character. And I love hearing different authors' journeys. For me, I know a lot of authors decide to publish independently, which is a great avenue. For me, I wanted to get a literary agent and work with a mainstream publisher. So I think it took me, I can't even tell you, Janie, how many rejections I got. On the first book, I had a friend who had published 4 novels with Penguin. Or was it Penguin? It was some big publisher. He wrote cozies, and so he helped me. He looked at my query letter, and I used to look at Query Shark, which is the late Janet Reed. She's a former literary agent who's amazing, and she was so kind and gracious with her time for authors. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to get my query all polished. So I started, querying agents, and I probably got 80 rejections for that first book. But I mean, and then I started getting requests. And I think as an author, you're really lucky in the early days if you can get feedback. A lot of agents are busy. You're not their client when they're considering your work. And so that was great when I started to get feedback, like, we really like this, but work on this. And I was like, aha. So I got the manuscript all polished up for that first book and wound up with a lovely literary agent. But then we were in submission for, it was almost a year. And then we got a 2-book deal, which turned into a 4-book deal. So it turned out well. So I came up, I tend to talk a lot, Janie, so I'm sorry. It's like, hopefully I like took the long way around to your answer, but
No, you're great. I love hearing these stories, and I know anybody watching this who's a reader loves hearing these stories too.
oh, good. Glad to hear it. And it's funny for me too, as a journalist, I'm used to asking questions. So I was
Yeah.
like, okay,
And
check.
I'm a lawyer, so we're a deadly
Great.
combination.
I know we are deadly. Start a podcast. But yeah, I decided to get into writing books because I love books and I was a writer and I love mystery novels. I love books that are dark and dangerous and everything like that. Like, I love podcasts too. And my husband laughs at me when he looks at the names of the podcasts I'm listening to. They're just, let's not meet, and this is actually happening, and it's kind of funny. So yeah, anything kind of dark and scary I love.
Now, did you have any problems making the because I got to tell you, I've tried to write fiction. I can't. I'm a legal writer, and that's what I
Yeah.
am. Did you have any transitional issues going from fact and truth and trying not to put your stamp on something, trying to be objective into, oh, I could just say, I can make this all up? Or was that just freeing?
It was freeing. I think that's a great question and great interpretation, because I think with journalism, it's a different part of me and it's a different part of my writing. It's a different part of how my brain works. And you have to report facts. You
Right.
can't, I maybe you want a story to go a different way, but you can't. You can't doctor up facts to make it so. So yeah, it's definitely freeing um, to be able to write the story as you feel it in the way you want to write the story and the character and the plot. And yeah, that's a great question. But yeah, it was freeing. It didn't hold me up. It was actually like, whew, I can write what I want. No one's gonna fact check me. I'm good.
That's great. Yeah. Um, okay, so now you had so all those did you keep all those rejection letters?
I would be buried alive if I did. No, I didn't. I think
Okay.
some of them were funny. I remember I got one from an agent who told me to read Michael Connelly. And I don't know if you ever do this, or anyone listening, like, you start writing an email and then you don't send it because you think better, right? Or like, I'll start writing, I'll take a walk around my yard. It's like, don't send
Yeah.
that, Jane. But yeah, I had one from this agent's like, you should read Michael Connelly. And I was starting to write, I could be 6 feet under and recite Michael Connelly from my deathbed. Okay. So yeah, so it's but I think agents are busy. And I think that for those agents in the past, when I was starting out, who were gracious enough and they requested my work to um, offer me constructive feedback, was fantastic. I mean, every writer when they're starting out here it's a subjective business, because
Mhm.
that's the beauty of books. If you don't care for my books, there's so many wonderful books out there, and vice versa.
Right. I can take you in my home office and you can see how many there are waiting to be read. Ugh. Anyway, all right. So every time we do one of these chats or I'm on a chat with other folks who are leading it, this is the question that comes up. Are
Yes.
you a plotter or are you a pantser? Meaning, Do you outline? Do you know? Like John Grisham, I've watched him on some various, recordings, and he said he never writes the first line till he knows the last line. He outlines the whole book and he knows exactly where it's going. Then some people say, like Lisa Scottolini, I've heard Hank Philippi Ryan say, she sits down, she doesn't know where it's going, and off she goes, and characters come to her. So are you that? Or are you somewhere in the middle? Or
I think I'm somewhere in the middle. When I first started out, it was just my imagination and I didn't really have a plot in place. But one thing with, the agent I work with and editors, that they want to see the synopsis. So, and okay, if I had to pick one thing that's kryptonite for me in the writing process, is writing a synopsis. And it tends to, like, the Reader's Digest version of something. It's like, oh man, that kills me. It's got to be one page or two. So I'd write some giant thing. So what I'll say about planning, I think it can be really helpful. That way you sort of have an idea what's going to happen with the story. But what I believe and what works for me as a writer is that sometimes a story is going to take you in a different direction. You have the plan in place, but and I think if you don't follow it, it's not going to be as good as if you're trying to do it yourself. And I mean, it might sound weird. I think that sometimes stories will come to a writer. It's like a gift. You'll get the idea. And there are times when I'm writing and I'm, laboring over a sentence or something. But when I'm truly like in the zone and the story is guiding me, um, then I know that it's the best story best version of the story that I can write. I remember with my second Julia Gooden book, *𝑑uplicity, I had this idea. I had to send the synopsis to my editor. So it was all buttoned up. And then I was like, should I tell them that I'm thinking about doing this? Because I really feel the story was going a different way. I'm like, I'm just going to do it. So yeah, I followed the story and I felt it, and in the characters. And I think that, yeah, so I'm somewhere in between. I
Okay.
write a synopsis and it's helpful. It's the bones of something. But then I think for me personally, you've got to follow the story because it might lead you in a different way.
Do you have writing rituals? Like, do you have to be at your desk at a certain time? Do you have to use a certain laptop, a certain pen? Does it have to be
No,
the right environment, or can you just write anywhere? Like Harlan Coben said, he wrote in the back of cabs and coffee
I've
shops in New York for years.
sometimes I don't have a dedicated office, which is so sad. Like right now, if you could look around, I'm still looking at my satellite here, which shut itself off. Um, I don't have a door. So when I'm like have to do calls, I generally like go up to my bedroom and I have a desk there, but the background is like so bland. So I can write anywhere. And sometimes it's between, I've got like two of my sons sitting next to me asking me for stuff, and I'm just in the zone. I'm not ignoring my kids. Don't call social services, but um, you know, I'm thinking about my book. And being a newspaper reporter really helped in that because newsrooms are loud.
Right.
I remember, being on the crime beat, you got the scanner going, CNN's going, there's some reporter next to you making a call. So I've been good about training myself to cut out the noise, unless it's something that requires my attention. So yeah, no, I don't have a ritual. Um, Sometimes what I do though, when I'm plotting or thinking or I have a story idea, I'll go on a hike and I clear
Mhm.
my head, and that really helps with the creativity. Or even doing some like mundane thing around the house, like vacuuming or housework. Like it's just doing something mundane, and the ideas come. So I don't have a ritual. I don't have a dedicated space. God knows I probably should. So it's like catch as catch can. Like when can I write? And um, I think, yeah, it's like, sometimes I sit upstairs in my room. Janie, you live in California. It's so beautiful here. We're so blessed with the weather. I have a really lovely table outside where I sit and I'll write out there. So it's just whenever I can,
Yep.
whenever inspiration hits, and then or if I'm stuck or I'm thinking about something, it's just get out, get away from the keyboard, go take a walk, go think, go see nature, and just then the ideas come.
Yep. Makes sense. Some people say they take a shower and then the hot water
Oh,
hits the head, and that's when the ideas.
wow. Maybe it's that.
I work down a lot of cases in the shower.
Oh,
I get up in the morning, I'd be getting ready to go to the office, and I maybe it's just because you're in there by yourself and you can't really get distracted,
that's true. There's no one to ask you questions, right?
right? So you're washing your hair and all of a sudden you go, oh, wait a minute, I should ask him that question, or
You're
I
right.
should put this in the brief, or whatever. So,
So
all
Jane,
right. So the Julia Gooden books, 4 books in total. Do you have them there?
I do. And now I'm like turning over here. I feel like I'm an infomercial person. And
That's
here
okay.
we
That's the whole point. We want to sell some books.
okay. So this was the first book in the series. Last time you saw him. And then we have Duplicity.
Mhm. Great
And
covers.
yeah, those were great covers. I have the hard copy of this in the garage somewhere. This is worth killing for. This is my favorite in the series. I like that one a lot. And then You Fit the Pattern. I thought this was such a cool cover too. They did a really
Yes.
nice job with that.
Okay. So are there ever going to be more Julia books, or is that part of the past now?
No, I mean, you never know. You never know. I think as a writer, it's fun to be creative and explore different things. I do have a synopsis I wrote up for another book. I felt like I was happy with the last book, how I left the character. Um, she has a long simmering romance, sometimes unrequited, with Detective Ray Navarro. So I left her in the last book in a very good place in her life.
Mhm.
Yeah, you never know. You never know if there'll be another book. I do. Yeah, I was thinking the other day I did have an idea for another one. So yes, we'll see what Julia is up to.
Okay, because I want some more Julia. Just saying.
I'll get
I
to it.
I do like that character a lot, and we don't want to give anything away, but they're very fast paced.
Mhm.
There's a lot going on. There's a lot of tension, and we won't talk anymore about the detective, but um, all right. So tell me a little bit about
Everyone is perfect here.
what was the inspiration?
Okay, so that this book has a backstory. I wanted to write something different, and I wanted to do sort of a more of a psychological suspense. The Julie Gooden books were kind of hard-bitten crime fiction and police procedural in some way. So the originally came up with this idea for the book, which is not what it is now, but this was pre-COVID, and I thought about writing a book with a plot where about a drug that would take away your worst memories. And on paper, it sounded pretty cool. I know there's been some really great content that's come out since about the idea of changing memories, like Severance and Homecoming, which was an awesome podcast, and they turned into a series. And I started writing, and the first 2 chapters I really liked. And then I remember at one point my agent's like, yeah, maybe this isn't going to work with the whole drug thing. So I was like, darn it. And she was right because it wasn't singing. So then COVID happened. And then, of course, it was lockdown, and like a lot of people were doing different things. They were baking bread. I'm not a baker. So um, I started binging like a lot of old movies. My mom, who I mentioned, loved old movies. And I remember being a kid and watching Gaslight with Ingrid Bergman, and Angela Lansbury was in that too. And I was like, oh, I want to see that again. And it held up. It's a great movie. It's kind of funny rewatching something like that. Like some parts are like very dramatic with the music, like da da da. But that whole idea of gaslighting and someone being so diabolical that they would, and having the ability to convince someone that they're going crazy. So that was simmering. And then also during lockdown, I reread The Talented Mr. Ripley by uh, uh, Patricia Highsmith, yes, and she's such an amazing writer, and that was such a good book. And then I was also reading a lot of Liane Moriarty, Big Little Lies. So all these themes were going like we gaslighting, we have a psychopath, we have friendships, we have deceit. So all those things were kind of percolating, and I was like, well, I had the idea for the main character in the book, Carly Bennett, and then I was like, and then it all sort of these disparate things came together, and I was like, okay, I know what this story should be. and I've got it. So yeah, it took me a little bit, but then I finished it and wrote that. So yeah, it was as I mentioned, definitely different than the Julia Gooden series. I think Julia is a very confident character, and she's very driven. Whereas the main character in Everyone is Perfect here, her name's Carly Bennett. She is a young rising star professional. She is a young English professor at USC, University of Southern California. I think on the exterior, she seems to lead an enviable life. As I mentioned, she's rising star. She was listed as, fictional, of course, a 30 under 30 to look out for in the LA Times. But underneath, she has sort of an imposter syndrome going on. She had a very difficult childhood. Her mother remarried a very rich doctor who lives in Malibu. So in the book, Carly and her mother go live with her new family, and someone doesn't want her there. And she gets, not to give too much away, she gets exiled to this boarding school for children with behavioral problems. And during her first month there, her mother's killed. So in current day, she's still fighting that past, despite her professional success. And her stepbrother, Julian, who she hasn't seen in 15 years, reappears on the scene with promises that he has information about what happened to her mother. So as Carly starts to relook into something it was too painful to look into before, dormant memories start to resurface, and she winds up spiraling and having lost time. And there's also a janitor at USC who has some dirt on Carly that he threatens he's going to go to the dean with, and he winds up killed. And Carly finds his body in her office with her name scrolled next to the dead body. So she starts to wonder, along with the police, whether she had a hand in the janitor's death and her mother, since both victims died in a similar fashion. So it was fun, and it definitely more POVs in that book. Young women, her best friend Ava, her assistant Rebecca. So it was fun to write from their perspectives as well. And Gen
And I was just
Z.
going to say, you have a lot of characters.
Yes, I generally
And
do.
you switch that point of view. They're all written like in third person. They're not first person narratives, but you switch up a lot. And especially with these three female characters who are very different. And I will just say they're all fascinating in their own right. We don't want to give too much away. We don't want to have spoilers. But you've created three very different women. And of course, Carly's mother also plays into the story, even though she's deceased.
Right.
She's another interesting female character. And then you've got a bunch of men in here that are also very interesting. You have the two stepbrothers, the stepfather, and then of course the janitor. How did you, as a writer, I'm flipping pages and going, oh, now here it's somebody else. Plus you've got time differences.
Right.
You're going back and forth between present day and to the previous events. How do you keep it all straight? Do you write it as one straight narrative, switching it all up, or do you write like everything from Carly, everything from Julian, then try to mash it together? How does that process work?
That's a great question, Jeannie. It's all one straight narrative. So I don't, that would be an interesting way to do it. Just, write all Carly's story and all her, Ava, her best friend's story. But yeah, it's one straight line. One writer who I love, who does multiple POVs, you mentioned 𝓚𝐾𝓽𝓱𝓸𝓻. He does that quite a bit.
Yeah.
And some readers, that's not their bag, and that's totally okay. That's too many. They just want one. I mean, with the Julie Gooden books, it was really her. It was her story that she was telling. But I wanted to explore that and here as well, and kind of looking at these different women in their lives and how they interact with each other and how turns of events and happen, and there's jealousy and there's trust and everything else in the mix. But I wanted to look at their relationships as well. But yeah, it's definitely like a linear line. It's the whole story out there, piece by piece, instead of segmented by character as I write.
So I would think that would be challenging because you're so good at not giving away too much but keeping the reader going, and then you drop back into another point of view, and now that tells us what we wondered was happening back here. So do you find yourself going back and revising that a lot to make sure that you don't drop it too soon? Or, you know, I would think you could get some continuity problems too that you might have to deal with in editing, like make sure that it all makes sense going forward. So that must be kind of a process itself, right?
Um, I don't I'm thinking about that, Jeannie. Yeah, I mean, certainly going back and making sure like I'm not giving too much away. But it just kind of flows. So, but yes, I always go back, I self-edit, make sure I haven't given too much info, like chapter 2 when Julian comes back in chapter 6. So, but yeah, yeah, maybe it's just the characters letting me know how things are. But yeah, it just
It's
flows
just
forward.
quite a juggling act, I would think, and you pulled it off, which is
Phil,
the
well, thank
point, is
you.
that,
Thank you.
yeah, because I kept going, well, now wait a minute, what's she up to? Now, where did he come from? Okay, and again, that's perfect because that's what kept me up till like 3 o'clock.
You're very sweet. And one thing I love, and my son Beck is starting to do this now. I love puzzles. I love puzzles. My mom loved puzzles. Like back in the day, she would do the New York Times crossword puzzle in ink. I mean, that's diva right there. I could not do that. And now it's all on your computer, which is so much fun. But I
I was
love
gonna say, I do it online, I don't do it in ink.
I know. Like there's a publication called Games, and I love crosswords, and I'm like, oh, this is so old school. You gotta like write in your words. And being a journalist, I can't read my own writing. That's a honest to God truth. I'll write a grocery list. I'm like, what did I write? But I love puzzles and how they interconnect. I love jigsaw puzzles. I started doing those in COVID too, but I love any kind of word puzzles and how everything fits together, and it fits together perfectly in the end. So that's what I aspire to, like these pieces that don't seem to match up, or they're working separately, but they're actually not. They all fit perfectly together.
Well, you did a great job. Um, all right, and then research. Did you have to do any research for this book? Without getting into any spoilers, to make sure that some of the characters were, how should I put this delicately, accurately portrayed. Would that make sense?
It would, yes. Yeah, I think one of the early questions that you asked me is sort of the freedom that you have as a writer that you don't have as a journalist, but you still have to be accurate
Right.
with history or a place that perhaps you've never been to, or um, to portray a character who might be a different nationality in an appropriate way. So there's definitely research that goes on in that. I did research on what's the difference between a psychopath and a sociopath. And um, I researched imposter syndrome. And then, sometimes I have a character, Ava Patel, who I talked about her a lot with my agent when I was creating her.
Mhm.
So it was just being sure I was being accurate uh, to her and to her background. So yeah, there's definitely, even though I am having some freedom of writing fiction, you need to be accurate. And then like with my Julie Gooden books too, there were two police detectives that I reached out to, like, hey, can you guys, I think I know this is 100% accurate, but could you just check to be sure this would sound legit if you were running a
Sure.
case. I actually just finished a new manuscript, like just finished it recently, and I've never done anything on a historical bent before.
Oh,
And I think genealogy is really cool. I find it fascinating. I never did like a deep dive into it. I just heard like stories from my mom and dad. My husband's totally into it. Like he loves it. He found some like Civil War diary from some ancestor and talked about it till I wanted to like run away. Hopefully he's not gonna watch this. Sorry, love you, honey. But with this book, I wound up getting a subscription to ancestry.com, and I discovered
mhm.
that I had an ancestor who was murdered, and she was 20 years old. It was in the turn of the century, and she was a really, really gifted artist. She, on my mom's side of the family, her body was discovered like floating in Chautauqua Lake, and The
Wow.
newspaper, I found these newspaper clips, articles about her, and those were fascinating on their own because, in 1898, you're not gonna have a photograph. So there were these sketches that they did of her wearing this bonnet, and it was in the Buffalo Evening News. And the first one was, missing woman. The next was like search continues, and then the third part was body found. And so and I love history. I was a history minor, so that I had to make sure when I wrote this book that at the time and women's roles and in at the turn of the century that I was being accurate. It takes place in Jamestown, New York, where my mom's from, which is a small town in upstate New York.
That's
Near
where Lucy was from.
Yeah, here's a funny story. My mother interviewed Lucille Ball for a newspaper article, and my mom said that she had to go to Lucille Ball's house,
Oh,
and she said
wow.
she was about to knock on the door, and she could hear Lucille Ball like swearing up a storm. Like, so I thought that was pretty funny.
There's a museum, a Lucy and Desi museum.
Yes, there is.
Yeah.
There is a museum,
Wow.
but that was really fun.
Interesting.
Going back to having to be authentic, doing research to reflect the time and women's roles. And I love readers. Readers are the best, and sometimes they will let me know if there's something that they think that might not be 100% accurate. So readers are smart and sharp as anyone I've ever met. So you need
And
to
they
make
have Google,
yeah. So you need to
and
make
they will tell you.
I know. They will. They'll tell you for sure.
I
They
have a
will.
friend who just, I will not name her in case she watches this, but we read a book and I will not name the book, but they had a character watching a certain TV show on, and it was a certain year. And we had book club and she was like, that show was not on the air yet, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, all right,
Smart.
just, that was not a big point in the book.
That's
Went and checked. So
yeah. Well, that's important. I think for me, my biggest fear is always making an error. I can't stand making an error. Like when, you'll get your final proof from your editor, and you're looking and you're like, oh God, I hope and they've had so many people look at it, copy editors and other people prior, but you're like, oh my gosh, I hope there's no error in here. And, chances are something might slip by.
yeah.
And that's the worst feeling to me. It's like,
Yep.
"Oh, I can't believe that happened," and, but it does. We're human, and even you can have lots of eyes on things. I actually like being edited. I like people to look at my work to make sure and save me from myself sometimes. I might have missed something.
Oh, it happens. I've filed documents with the court and 6 or 7 of us have read them.
Right, and
And
there's,
then
like,
you're
something
getting ready to go to the hearing and you pick up your documents to review and you go, it's a typo.
Oh,
And it's like, I read it, my secretary read it, the chief counsel read it, but somebody else read it, the inspector general read it, and not one of us caught it.
right.
So it happens.
It does. It does happen.
Nobody's perfect, except in your book, everybody's perfect.
Everybody's perfect. I love Severin House did such a beautiful job with I thought the cover was really cool with a broken
Yes,
white picket fence was very
yes. It's a great cover. Great
it
colors too.
did.
It will stand out on a shelf in the bookstore if you're walking. This one will jump
Yes.
out, I think, with the blue.
So
Now, this is your first book with Severn.
yes, it is, and, well, I mean, one thing that warms my heart, my dad was from England, he was British, and my editor and, Severn House is based in England, and I'm not saying
Oh,
that everyone from England is going to be just absolutely lovely and polite, but they are just the most polite, lovely folks, and they are really, great collaborators with their writers, everything from the cover to the blurb of the and they're just lovely, lovely people, so
great. So my next question was what you're working on next, but you already told us now it's historical and it's
it is.
finished.
It's
So
finished.
when can we expect to get it in our hot little hands?
I will keep you posted. The one thing with that book, it's historical, but it's present day too. So I told it, I don't have as many POVs in this story as everyone is perfect here, but it's told, I was inspired by my ancestor who was killed at such a young age. So I created a character around her, which is very similar to her life, a young woman. In the book, her name is Lena Anderson, and wants to leave the confines of her work, where she's a spooler at a factory, which was a huge industry in Jamestown at the time. And she has a couple suitors, and she winds up murdered. And I wrote, in present day, she has a great niece who is a documentary filmmaker, and she is looking for lightning in a bottle. Her character, her name is Meg Castle, and she was a wonderkind in the book at Columbia Film School, and she had this like a great film when she was a senior, but she hasn't had anything in a while, and she's estranged from her mother. Her mother's a former high school teacher, and her mother was doing a genealogy project, which turned Hunt for a Killer, because she was looking for the killer of their ancestor. So the filmmaker comes back to her small town after her mom dies and finds out about this ancestor, Lena, who was murdered, and starts looking into what happened to her. And she starts having these moments of deja vu, and she looks remarkably like the dead ancestor. They could be twins. And so she has to determine whether these moments of deja vu are warnings from her ancestor, sort of imprinted in her DNA, or if it's an illusion of memory. And one thing I think is pretty cool, like this concept of instinct, right? I mean, is instinct possibly something that is part of evolution, that's something that is encoded in our DNA from our ancestors that they learned, or is it something else, or is it nothing? And there was one thing I read, which was this kind of interesting study. And I love animals. I'll preface this. I have a bunny rabbit in the backyard that I feed. I haven't seen him in a couple of days. I hope he's coming back. But there was a research study done with mice. The mice lived, but so the mice were exposed to the smell of cherry blossoms. And every time that they smelled cherry blossoms, they got zapped. So they'd have like a little electric jolt. And that happened kind of continually. And then their next generation of these mice were also studied, and they were generation number 2 were exposed to the smell of cherry blossoms, not zap, but just the smell, and the mice freaked out. So it was the idea of the whole thing about, this first generation of mice, they smell cherry blossoms, they get zapped. Generation number 2, they smell the same thing, and it causes a reaction. So and a fear, an instinctual fear that this is something bad. So I find that fascinating. I don't know, is it true? Who knows? But I think the whole thing with instinct, and is that something that's imprinted? The story is called Imprint. So is instinct imprinted from our ancestors as a warning or a help, or is it just something else?
Sounds fascinating. I can't
Well,
wait to
thank
read
you.
that.
Thank you.
All right. Well, those were the questions that I had for you. I really appreciate you taking out time to chat today. Because I know you're busy, and you have a publication date coming up, April 7th.
Yes, April 7th.
April 7th. It's already available for pre-order on all the various websites, and Severn has it on their website.
Yes.
So this is the next one, and then we'll watch for Imposter to come out.
Imprint.
No,
Imprint. But I like Imposter. That's a good one too.
Right.
Okay, that's going to be.
I don't know how I got imposter in my head. I guess because I was thinking about imposter syndrome with Carly. Okay, great. Well, it's been wonderful chatting with you, and I'm going to stop the recording.
Okay.
And thanks so much.
Of course. Thank you.
I can figure out how to stop it.